Welcome in, everyone. Thank you all, everyone that is joining. Today, we're talking about the newest Matrix movie, Matrix Resurrections. A little bit of housekeeping before getting started. The Patreon is going to be ready next week for people that want to join. And then also, I've been prepping for the show this Friday, the weekly movie update, which is going to be about what the point of award shows ever was and if they ever meant anything. Looks like Pete Davidson might be hosting the Oscars this year, which I think would be weird. But anyway, that'll be for this Friday. Matrix. Okay. So my thoughts whenever it comes to this movie, it felt like a huge waste of time. It felt like nobody that was making the movie had any understanding of what the point of the original Matrix was. It felt like it didn't care at all about any of the previous movies that had existed. The anticipation, at least for me, I'm wondering what the anticipation is for you guys going into this movie was weird. I was very excited about it. I was very excited going into the new Matrix movie. I love, in some way, the older movies. Each of them, I think they all have their charm. I think the first one is close to perfect as a movie can really get. And then the sequels, I feel that they're admirable. They're okay. There's some good in them, in terms of at least being unique. But going into a new movie, especially, and I'm not going to spoil anything here, in terms of how the third movie from the original trilogy concluded, it's obviously very intriguing to see how it is that this newest one is actually going to add up to anything or what it's going to add up to. So, and the Wachowskis, I'll talk about in a second. I don't really like the Wachowskis very much. I feel like they're ill-disciplined. I feel like most of the time they're an exciting pair, but I really feel like they go for a lot of, I guess, when I think about their movies, I always think it's kind of like throwing a bunch of cake batter at the wall, seeing what sticks. And I feel like they're ill disciplined a lot of times whenever it comes to actually like, okay, let's slow it down, tell a story, let's connect with the audience. But I feel like The Matrix was actually an example of whenever their storytelling worked and it connected and it did a very good job. But, it's not going to happen very often that you end up connecting with the audience. They didn't connect with the audience in the sequels. They didn't connect with the audience in Jupiter Ascending or Speed Racer or Cloud Atlas. Again, very exciting things, but they're not disciplined whenever it comes to actually telling a story. So I was that being said, I was excited going into this one because I feel like they are always exciting to some degree, but whenever it comes to actually telling a story, they suck. Except for the Matrix. So the hope was maybe they're gonna go back for good reasons, or I guess maybe this team is gonna go back for genuine reasons of wanting to tell the story. Or maybe it's just gonna be who knows what. That's pretty much what I mean. It was a weird level of anticipation going into this movie. And that being said, even you know what? I'll move on from the Wachowskis. I don't have to talk about the Wachowskis the whole time. But I feel like they, in a lot of ways, personify what people think of as the new way of making movies, which is just very loud, very exuberant, very colorful, just trying a whole bunch of experimental stuff that doesn't actually go anywhere. And that gets under my skin, at least. I don't really like that very much. But the most important thing in terms of talking about this movie is the original Matrix. I feel like the original Matrix works on so many levels. The story, just take the story, is very beautifully told. Don't need to spend a whole bunch of time on that, but the parallel between the two worlds, but then even focusing in on Neo in particular, and the cultural aspect that it gets into, which I'll compare to what's going on in this new movie. But the cultural aspect of the original one, it fit so lockstep in with the culture of the time, and by the time I mean even now our time. Everyone, this whole thing about feeling disillusioned with your life in some way, feeling like you're meant for a higher purpose, but questioning what that means, not becoming too cheesy with it. It did a great job of being about something while not being a message movie. And, baking into that a really well told story filled with mystery and excitement. And I think that, the following sequels of The Matrix kind of did away with all of the goodwill that was created with The Matrix. But I still feel like The Matrix is a fantastic movie. I think the problem with The Matrixes that followed was that their plots didn't make any sense. I really feel like they had a great running start, and they still worked with all of the ethos and all of the foundations that made The Matrix great. And I feel like that's the goodwill that you run off of in those movies. but the plot made such little sense that I think that even going back to revisit them, you so much want to love the following Matrix movies, but it just doesn't happen. It really does not happen. And it's sad, but I feel like it's tough to make a good case for those movies. But then that brings us to the newest one, Matrix Resurrections. So again, I'm not going to spoil what is actually going on in Matrix Resurrections, and it's very tough because the second you give away any plot points, you kind of know to some degree what's going on. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So all I will say is that, like the trailer says, we are back in the Matrix, and the movie does, I think, a pretty good job of covering a lot of ground, almost too much ground in 2.5 hours. The first thing I'll say right off the bat is I think that Matrix Resurrections would have been a lot better if they had made it a series. Put it on HBO Max as a series would have been a lot cooler. I still would have had a lot of problems with this. And if you haven't seen it, I added Matrix Resurrections as my least favorite movie of last year. The top and worst 10 movies of 2021 are on the channel if you want to go check that out. But that's all I'll say. Hello, Vintage Web 82. Good to see you. We're back in the Matrix, and I wanted to start off by explaining this to you guys because I've been thinking a lot about it. I feel like whenever you are watching a movie, there is a hierarchy of giving a shit. Okay, it is a level that you go through when you watch a movie that pretty much says, okay, am I going to care about this movie? I feel like at the very top, okay, like if you got a pyramid, it starts with story at the top, and then below that you've got culture, essentially. Okay, and then below that, you have what the movie's actually about. A cheesy way you could say is the message. I think it's more kind of like the ethos, like what the movie's really trying to not so much say, but like what it's really about. You know, when you're watching a movie, when you're watching a story, when you're reading something, you're like, this movie applies. This story applies in a lot of ways to life. I feel like that's what you need out of a great movie. First movie did that incredibly well. But looking at this Matrix, starting at the top with the story, the thing that you actually need no matter what to give a shit. This movie, I don't think they thought at all. It feels like they did not think at all about just the flat out plot of what is actually going to be happening. The story is so dull. In terms of what do we actually want to see these characters do? What do we actually want these characters to want to accomplish? What do we want these villains to accomplish? I rewatched the first Matrix in anticipation of seeing this movie. One thing I forgot about is how incredible of a case the agents actually make for what it is that they're trying to do. Now, clearly they're the villains, but I feel like in any great movie, you really want for your villains to actually have a point for existing, to actually kind of see like, wow, I want all of these agents to be destroyed, but I can see where they're coming from, and I understand why they actually want to destroy the heroes. And in the same way, you see what the heroes are doing, and you're like, wow, you're fighting for something that is universal, something that's an admirable cause. I want you to win because, quite honestly, I'd be on your side. It does not matter, good or bad. You want for everyone to be well motivated in your movie, and this movie is lacking in so much of that. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of critics say, they've talking about how they've updated the more technical stuff, and I'll get to like that cultural aspect here in a second. But I feel like just in terms of a level of story, what does the villain actually want to do? And then at some point you figure out what the villains actually want, and you're like, is that it? Is that real? That's all they're fighting for? That's really all you guys are fighting for? And then you realize what the heroes are fighting for, and you're like, is that this franchise has been dormant for 18 years, and this is why it's coming back. It feels a little embarrassing. It feels a little bit like a waste of time whenever you actually realize what in the world are we all doing here. And it's a shame because if you go back to the main and the stark difference between what it was like then and what it's like now is very, very, very unfortunate. Okay, and then in the level of the actual culture of the movie. So that's kind of like in terms of you go back to the first Matrix. It was so good because the conversation that it was having between digital and analog, the real world, the fake world, being succumbed by all of the glitter of all of the new digital technological advances that were made in the 21st century. It makes a lot of sense. It fit so well in that story too. Didn't feel like anything was being forced. This movie, they've decided what they're going to do. Whereas before, let's say it's the real world and the fake world. That's kind of what we were looking at in the original trilogy. This movie has instead decided to say, we're going to focus in on what is a red pill and what is a blue pill. That is pretty much on a cultural level what they have decided to bake their story in this Matrix movie. And I feel like that gets mileage in this movie for about half an hour. After half an hour, the whole red pill, blue pill trope is just overplayed and it starts going nowhere. They keep talking about this again and again and again. And it's just so what? Who cares? Who like really? And I think that it all goes back, I think, to the story, the hierarchy of giving a shit. If you don't give a shit about the story, the fact that you keep bringing up this cultural stuff about the blue pills and the red pills, it's like, why should we care? Because we don't know why anyone's doing anything. We don't even care why anyone's doing everything because there's no mystery in this story. And then the last one, and the part that I think misses so much about what makes the Matrix cool, maybe it's more so what actually made the Matrix stick around for so long and even makes people still interested in the Matrix, is what it is actually about. I feel like this is like the third level on the hierarchy of shit. You got the story, you got the cultural stuff, how it ties in with everyday life, and then you've got like, what is this thing actually about? It's got to be about something. Like a bad way would be like a message. I hate saying that. Just more what it's about. In the original movie, the thing that made it so powerful was that we're following this everyman type of person, and they're realizing who they are is ending up going to save and free humanity in a big way. Humanity was really what it is you were fighting for in the original trilogy. And that's a big ask. Like that is a heavy weight. It's a heavy weight enough to really universal. It's universal enough to rally everyone together and I think get excited about a movie. That's a great motivator. This movie has completely, not only do they not focus on humanity in the Matrix movie now is seen as just such an afterthought. Like it does not come into any perspective in terms of what's going on. The first three movies were focusing a lot on what is it that we're actually going to do to save everyone. This movie, I'm not going to say what we're actually focusing on here. But I'll say that the care for where is humanity exactly right now, what's going on with the human race, it feels like such an afterthought, which is such a shame because that feels like the people involved with this movie have totally forgotten one of the key ingredients that feels like the salt is missing in the cake. Like what in the world is going on? This thing, it doesn't even taste like the Matrix. It doesn't feel like the Matrix. And that's to say, not that I'm fine with, they did a bunch of technical gobbledygook, which I think is fine, but it's gone much more in a way towards talking about personal identity. And I've seen a bunch of people in the comments of my other videos, they talk about talk about woke stuff or things like that. I get what people mean by that. I don't want to describe this as that, but the movie has what I would think people are saying, because a ton of reviews say this. I think this movie has swung from focusing on humanity as the real saving grace in this entire universe and gone towards something which is nothing but personal identity. This movie, that's all I'll say about it. I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's the focus away from humanity. I think is a real shame to lose in the Matrix stories, because that's literally what the Matrix is all about. I understand. I'm sure that if one of the Wachowskis was here or one of the writers was here, I get it. I get that there's a reason. I see what you're trying to do. Yes, it makes sense, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not engaging. And it makes it actively boring. I think to be nice about this movie, I would say that it has no idea what it is actually doing. I think a more honest take on what's going on here is that it actively undermines everything that made the first Matrix stand up against the test of time. I think that's a real shame. So that's my thought on Matrix. If you are in the chat, if you're watching, put your thoughts on the Matrix, your thoughts on anything else that you want to talk about. One thing that I was going to do here while waiting for people to add some comments was I was reading through a bunch of other reviews of what people said about it. And what feature I'm thinking of adding here is going through what most other critics are saying about movies. The first point that I'll make, I thought something very useful that I heard from people was said, if you liked the sequels to the first Matrix movie, then you were more than likely going to very much dislike this movie. And if you really dislike the sequels, but like the first Matrix movie, then you were more than likely really, really going to love Matrix Resurrections. So let me know what you think about that in the comments. Going through a lot of what people were saying online, I looked at what Variety reviewed it of. I looked at Hollywood Reporter, and I looked at IndieWire's reviews. Variety and Hollywood Reporter, their critics were essentially saying the same type of thing. Variety said that it was a fun time, but, lacks actual originality, which is sad for a Matrix movie. Hollywood Reporter was saying that it's just nostalgia, malunking around, not really doing all that much. I took issue, and this is David Ehrlich over at IndieWire, who I think is a terrible critic. He said glowing review, absolute glowing review of Hollywood Reporter. And this is a common thing that I've seen a lot of people do, especially now, is take what is going on in The Matrix Resurrection and actually glorifying it as what Hollywood needs to be focusing on in the face of movies like they mentioned in this movie, in the face of something like Spider-Man No Way Home. First of all, David Lynch said this all the time. I know that artists, not the best critics, but I think he made a great point. It is so unfair whenever someone sees a movie and the laziest criticism they can come up with is just comparing it to another movie and that being where they start and stop with it. That is essentially what that review does. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter do the same, so I just wanted to make a comment about that. I hate the idea of saying that a movie like Matrix, something that totally misunderstands what it is that a huge audience is actually looking for, is what Hollywood needs to be pursuing instead, and propping that up against a movie like Spider-Man No Way Home, which very clearly has found a heart, has found the heart of the audience and keeps people coming back again and again and again. Go check out his review. It is so cynical. It is so incredibly cynical. And he also compares it to The Last Jedi, saying that if franchises are going to continue, they need to go back to their past. They need to reconcile with their pasts in the ways that something like Last Jedi did. I like parts of Last Jedi. I understand why people don't like it. But the IndieWire thing, because that is absolutely... I hated that review so much. He did a terrible review of Dune as well. So that's something I'm going to try doing. I'll do it for a few reviews. So yeah, the Patreon is coming out next week. There will be 3 tiers: a $3 tier, a $5 tier, and a $10 tier. It gives you a bunch of cool extra behind the scenes stuff. I'm populating it right now so that it will be ready for next week for people to check out. And next week is going to be Doctor Strangelove. So if you're watching this right now, reviews are every Wednesday at 5 p.m. So go check out Doctor Strangelove before next Wednesday. The following Wednesday is going to be Don't Look Up. I'm going to start putting videos out every month that kind of announce the 4 videos that are going to be reviewed during the week for that month. But other than that, I think that's everything. So thank you everyone very much for watching. And please be sure to like and subscribe to the videos for future updates on reviews and movie news.